folks, since Vice President and presumptive, or I guess now official, Democrat nominee Kamala Harris won't take any of our questions, won't give us any answers about her radical past policies of just a couple years ago, we're going to have to resort to our own investigations, our own research, and our own deep dive into who Kamala Harris really is and what she's done or has failed to do for her home state of California. So I have the perfect person to dig into that and so much more. Maybe give us a little premonition of what would be to come if we did, in fact, I shudder at the thought, elect a president, Kamala Coconut Tree. So here today to deep dive into all of it with us is Government Accountability Institute president and best-selling author of Blood Money and so many other wonderful books, Peter Schweizer. Peter, it's so great to have you. I've seen you all over the channel, obviously for many years now, but I recently saw you kind of giving a good backstory into Kamala Harris that a lot of people are unfamiliar with. You know, we see a lot of the sound bites of the dumb things that she says, but there's a lot more there than just the coconut tree and the laughing. What do we need to know about Kamala?
Well, yeah, I think you make an important point, and that is that people can kind of look at the atmospherics of Kamala Harris and they're missing the larger picture. And the larger picture is that her political rise in California came about precisely because powerful people in California wanted to cover up some very serious crimes that were happening in the Bay Area. Go back to 2003. She entered politics when she decided to run against the San Francisco district attorney, a guy named Terrence Hallinan. Terrence Hallinan was investigating several of Willie Brown's friends. Willie Brown, of course, was the mayor of San Francisco at this time. He had had a romantic relationship while he was married with Kamala Harris earlier. And Willie Brown backed her race. And part of the reason he wanted her to run is he wanted Terrence Hallinan out of there because these investigations into his friends on corruption and other serious charges were bothering him. The other thing that was happening is that very powerful institutions in San Francisco linked to certain things like St. Ignatius School were part of the investigation looking into pedophile acts being committed by teachers and others that were linked to the Catholic Church. This was something else Terrence Hallinan was looking into. Kamala Harris runs against him, beats him, and what does she do, Tommy? She immediately drops the cases against Willie Brown's friends, the corruption charges, et cetera. And she also deep sixes the investigation into those powerful Bay Area institutions on pedophile charges. Terrence Hallinan was going to bring charges against those that were accused of pedophile acts. He also had collected hundreds of pages of internal church documents on investigations that had been ongoing. Those documents disappeared under Kamala Harris. Terrence Hallinan was going to release them to the public. Victims groups wanted that to happen. She deep sixed it because she wanted to cover it up, and she was covering it up for very powerful people in the Bay Area.
So I remember living in California when Kamala was senator, and then when Kamala, of course, with her failed bid at the presidency back in 2019, she never even made it to 2020 in that pursuit. But I remember digging into a lot of these things, and it's so funny to me because that really was front and center, a lot of the stuff you're talking about. And then once she became the vice president, a lot of it really went away. People weren't really talking about it. People weren't bringing it up. A lot of really scandalous stuff there that normally, if it bleeds, it leads, or if it's anything about a sex scandal or whatever, people want to talk about it. But a lot of it really went away, and we just focused on Kamala and her dumb laugh and her dumb explanations for things. So it would seem like she's an unserious person, but she did a lot of damage to California, even as an unserious person. But I know that there's so much more there, you know, besides the affair with Willie Brown and all that salacious stuff. Her and what she did, she likes to portray herself now as this tough prosecutor. Was she really this tough prosecutor? And if she was, who did she spend her time going after? And were they the right people to go after?
No, I think that's a really important point. I mean, we've gotten used to, unfortunately, the last half decade or so to this lawfare where the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. has been weaponized to go after certain political figures that are the opponents of the Democratic Party or the opponents of Joe Biden. Donald Trump, of course, has been the recipient of a lot of that. That's exactly what Kamala Harris did when she was California Attorney General. So, for example, there were 6 nutrition health companies that were being investigated by the U.S. Department of Justice and by the Federal Trade Commission on serious charges involving potentially fraud and making up claims about their products. Seems like it would be totally tailor-made for Kamala Harris. In fact, her San Diego office put the documents together for the investigation to begin. What did Kamala Harris do? Kamala Harris shut down the investigation. Why? Well, it turns out those 6 companies happen to be represented by a law firm where her new husband, Doug Emhoff, was the managing partner of the office. So it was clearly a selective case. She should have recused herself. She did not. Flip the other side of the equation. Part of her responsibility as Attorney General of California was to approve the sale of nonprofit hospitals from one entity to another. And there was a series of hospitals owned by the Sisters of Mercy, which is a Catholic charity that could not afford to run hospitals anymore, was going to sell them to another nonprofit organization. That nonprofit organization and its effort to buy these hospitals, it was supported by the California Nurses Association. It was supported by women's groups because the new nonprofit promised to honor the commitments and maintain a full range of services. Here's the problem. Kamala Harris's biggest financial backer when she ran in California was the Service Employees International Union, SEIU. They poured millions of dollars into her campaigns. This new nonprofit did not want to have the SEIU unionize these hospitals. So what did Kamala Harris do? She rejected this one nonprofit from purchasing it from another nonprofit. What she did do, Tommy, was she approved a hedge fund from New York to take over this hospital. It was a hedge fund, of course, with financial connections to the Democratic Party. And what they did, of course, was strip the hospitals of a lot of the services in the community that were no longer available. So she selectively uses judicial power and the power of the state to punish her opponents and to help her friends. So with Kamala Harris as president, if you think the lawfare that we've seen over the last couple of years with the Department of Justice is something, you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to Kamala Harris doing the same thing.
And what it seems like following her record in these different pursuits, it doesn't feel like she's motivated by anything personal, but more she's motivated by whoever's going to give her money and what they tell her to do. She very much feels like a puppet to me. She doesn't feel like a mastermind. When I think of a mastermind, I think of Nancy Pelosi. I think of Barack Obama. I think of people that are wheeling and dealing and making decisions and pulling the strings for good or for evil. But when I see Kamala, I see a shell of a human who really just goes with whatever way the wind blows, whatever is going to help her the most, whoever is going to donate the most. It really does seem like that is her primary motivation in everything that she does. I want to dig in a little bit more to Doug Emhoff here. So a lot of folks don't really know much about him. Now we know about this affair with the nanny and all that. Again, salacious, scandalous stuff that doesn't really matter that much to the American people in their daily lives. But I'll tell you, Peter, because I was watching a show that I watch often on Bravo. I was watching Watch What Happens Live, and Doug Emhoff was a guest. This was probably 5 or 6 months ago. And Andy Cohen asked Doug Emhoff how he met Kamala. And if I remember correctly, he said something about how he was an entertainment attorney and he happened to meet Kamala and they fell in love. That's the way he wanted to present himself. Like he was kind of this innocuous entertainment attorney, like representing actors or representing entertainment folks. But there's a lot more there about Doug that seems a little deeper than an entertainment attorney. What else can you tell us about him?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And to your earlier comment, I think you're right. The problem with Kamala Harris is, where's the center of gravity? I mean, what is it that actually motivates or moves her forward? And there, certainly she's progressive, but when she was administering the law in San Francisco, she was very hard line. She threw a lot of people into jail on marijuana charges. So she's prepared to basically do what she thinks is going to serve her interests. Doug Emhoff, I think, is very interesting. Yes, he is an entertainment attorney, but he was also the managing partner of the West Coast operations for Venable, which is a very powerful law firm. And then, of course, he switched to DLA Piper. And as the managing partner, you're not just practicing law in your area of expertise, you're looking out for the interests of the law firm in general. You are managing a number of lawyers who work in a number of areas. And the thing to understand about Venable and DLA Piper is they represent a lot of international clients, including foreign governments. DLA Piper, for example, represents the Palestinian Authority. Some of the other firm, Venable, for example, has represented other foreign governments. So for him to sort of dismiss himself as a quote unquote entertainment attorney does not really get to the crux of what he does, which is he is a legal fixer. And his job is to find lucrative clients wherever they may be, bring that money into the law firm, and make sure that those client needs are being met. And he was apparently quite good at it because he got promoted by two very powerful firms to senior positions precisely for that reason.
He likes to really come off like he's just this jovial, happy man, but there's a lot more there too. And interesting because we're not getting a lot. You'd think if someone's about to be the first gentleman or whatever, we get a little more information about them. Kamala, too. I mean, she hasn't really had to answer any questions about her radical record, but a lot of the stuff that you're bringing up, people are not familiar with. They're completely unfamiliar with her past, what she's done to California, to San Francisco. And people are also really unfamiliar with the California political machine. A lot of people think, D.C. and New York, like that's the center of the political world. But living in California, I know that just from watching the way Nancy Pelosi maneuvers and watching the way Willie Brown maneuvers, it's a very interconnected circle, and they do anoint people into power. It's not based on even your own ambition or your own accomplishments. It really is like a coronation of who they decide is going to be placed on top. When you look at how all of this happened with the ousting of Joe Biden, and then, of course, the anointing of Kamala Harris, what Nancy Pelosi was able to do behind the scenes, what do you think really happened there, and who do you think made the final decision that Joe had to go?
Well, I think you make a great point about California. People don't realize, I think, how corrupt the political culture is in California. When they think of corruption, they think of Louisiana or Chicago or New York, and they're right to do so. But California ranks right up there. We're actually doing a massive investigation on California corruption right now, and it is widespread. I'll have more on that coming forward. I think when you look at the removal of Joe Biden, all roads point to one person, and that is Barack Obama. And what people have to understand is that Barack Obama and Michelle Obama have a long-term relationship with Kamala Harris that predates the election of Barack Obama as a United States Senator. In fact, when he ran for the Senate in Illinois, one of the people that campaigned aggressively for him on the ground in Illinois was an attorney from the Bay Area named Kamala Harris. In turn, when Kamala Harris won in 2003, she had some campaign debts later on, and a newly minted senator from Illinois named Barack Obama came to the Bay Area and held a fundraiser for her to help retire those debts. When Barack Obama first announced he was running for president of the United States in 2007, one of the first people on the ground in Iowa to campaign in the Iowa caucuses in the snow was Kamala Harris. If you look at the sort of layout of the Biden White House, a lot of the senior aides were Obama aides before they were Biden aides. And of course, there's that famous video of when Barack Obama visited the Biden White House and everybody was flocking around Barack Obama. And there was the president of the United States sort of standing in the corner by himself. So the Democratic Party is the Barack Obama party. It's not the Hillary Clinton party, and it is certainly not the Joe Biden party. And I think it was Barack Obama that made the decision to pull the plug and to move Joe out of the way. And Kamala Harris is somebody that he would like to have there precisely because of their long history and relationship. And if you want to look at the vision that he has for a Kamala Harris administration, I would suggest everybody go find a video clip when Barack Obama was having a conversation with Stephen Colbert in 2020. Stephen Colbert asked him, would you like to serve a third term? And he said, no, I wouldn't. But I tell you what, it'd be great if somebody were in the White House and I could whisper through an earpiece to he or she and help guide them and tell them what they could do. That, I think, is what he has in mind for a Kamala Harris administration. So I see Barack Obama as the center of this. Wow. There's no love lost between Barack Obama and Joe Biden, and he was very happy to push him aside for his longtime friend, Kamala Harris.
Do you think, maybe this sounds like a conspiracy theory, but maybe not so much. I don't put anything past Democrats. Do you think it's plausible that when Barack Obama told Joe to pick Kamala as his VP, that he was already foreshadowing what would happen with the downfall of Joe? I mean, people think that all of a sudden Joe started to fall apart. Joe was falling apart in 2020. My thought is what happened is that they put Joe into the position because Joe seemed moderate at a time where they needed to defeat Trump. They get Joe in there as their Trojan horse. Barack says, hey, but you got to make Kamala your vice president. And he was kind of waiting for Joe to just crumble in front of our very eyes so that the person that he can really control, who has loyalty to him, being Kamala Harris, would be the one that would assume this position, if not during Joe Biden's term, shortly thereafter into what would be a Joe second term, but now a Kamala first term. Do you think that this could have been premeditated, years in the making?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. I think the issue for the Democrats was not actually Joe Biden's mental state. It was his poor polling. It was the fact that he was behind in the polls. I think if they could have sort of kept along and kept him in there, certainly easy to control, whether it's Joe Biden or Barack Obama, that would be the safe bet. But I think the polling numbers became so bad that they felt they didn't have a choice. And of course, Kamala Harris was the perfect one to sweep in. And you are quite right. Barack Obama certainly wanted Kamala Harris as Joe Biden's running mate in 2020. And one of the reasons, I think, is their longtime friendship and association, which really gives Barack Obama a strong say in what would happen in a Harris White House.
If Kamala is somehow elected in 2024, do you think that she will just continue whatever Barack Obama would have for her? Do you think that she will just be a willing participant in whatever year we're on of Barack Obama's presidency?
I think we would, but I think it would probably be even further to the left than Obama's administration was. Of course, Obama was very much left of center. But in this way, if Barack Obama's kind of calling the shots, but not having to take the public flack, it's kind of a perfect arrangement for him. So I think we would see a carry-on of Barack Obama's administration, but I would see it tilting even further to the left, because what we're seeing with kind of woke politics, all the stuff related to, the transgender movements, I think Barack Obama would have been too cautious to take that on during his administration. But as far as today is concerned, I think he would probably be all in.
Yeah. You're right about him being able to call the shots, but have the plausible denial. Last thing I want to ask you about, because obviously you know everything about communist China and their pull on what would have been the Biden administration, but now going into what could potentially be a Harris administration. If somehow Kamala Harris were to be elected as our president, Tim Walz now as our vice president, what would our adversaries, namely China, what position would they be in? And do you think that they would be more excited about that prospect than another Trump term?
Oh, there's no question about it. And what you have to do is look at Tim Walz's history with China, which we are just starting to investigate. But it has all the hallmarks of a Chinese influence operation in which Tim Walz seems to be a willing participant. He traveled to China 30 times. He got married in China. And you could say, well, he just loves China. So what's the problem with that? The problem is he started a travel business for students to bring students to China. His partner in that was an organization in China that is widely known in the United States by our government and by experts to be a united front group whose job is to work with Chinese intelligence to recruit individuals and to get them to take kind of a pro-China position. When he was inaugurated as governor of Minnesota, bizarrely, he invited diplomats, Chinese diplomats, to attend his inaugural ceremony. And there was a wonderful write-up by the Chinese Foreign Ministry about this great governor in Minnesota who has just been elected. There's more to come, but there are some very long-standing deep ties between Tim Walz and the Chinese government that I think should be very serious areas for concern. And we're certainly doing more investigation on that right now.
Wow, there's so much there. I've learned so much today. I mean, I don't know how you keep all this information in your head. It's fascinating to me because you are like an encyclopedia of all the things that we really need to know, and that few people have the depth of knowledge that you have on this. That's why you're a best-selling author, obviously, and so many people look to you to get the real story and the deep dive. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time, for giving us all that information. I know you've got ongoing investigations and research, and you're just going to give us more and more. So thank you so much for adding to not only this show, but to the public discourse. I certainly appreciate it.
I always enjoy it. Thanks, Tomi, for having me.
Thanks so much. All right, folks, I hope that you learned as much as I learned today, because this stuff is truly flabbergasting. And I would encourage you to check up on everything that Peter and his team are doing, because it is mind-blowing. But that does it for this very special deep dive episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. See you right back here at 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow or on Monday. Until then, from Nashville, God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.